Hello, everyone. Welcome to another BDPA Tech and Career Talk. I am your Tech and Career Talk host and leader, Devin Jenkins. I serve as the IT pricing leader for US and Canada at GE Healthcare, as well as the founder and CEO of Share the Vibes LLC, where we connect people through music and technology. So I'm excited to have you with us for our bi-monthly Tech and Career Talks. These take place on the second and fourth Friday of each month. We have a range of topics spanning from as technical as brain machine interaction to our more career oriented talks around emotional intelligence and entrepreneurship. So we have something for everyone. So everyone can get something out of our conversations that can take you and help you in your careers. Just a little bit of context around BDPA for those who may not be familiar. BDPA is Black Data Processing Associates. The organization was started in 1975 as a forum for continuing to build computer technology skills in our youth, as well as fostering those career development professional skills and IT professionals of color in the industry. And our mantra is advancing careers from the classroom to the boardroom. So we're thankful to have you with us. The recording of this conversation will be available afterwards on our website, bdpa.org/tech and career talks. I'll share that link later. And also on our YouTube channel, which is National BDPA. So like, subscribe, follow, comment, tag a friend in the comments, all that good stuff, so we can make sure we get this message out to everyone. So that being said, I'll turn the floor over to our guest speaker today. We're excited to have Mr. Grady Crosby with us of Northwestern Mutual. I've seen Grady a few times around the Milwaukee area. I don't know if you saw me, but I saw you before I left town. I'm in Charlotte now, but no, you're definitely a well-respected person in that community who does a lot in the business world as well as the community at large. So we're excited to have you with us here today. I'll let you introduce yourself in your own right. I don't want to steal your thunder or put a damper on your story, but I will turn the floor over to our guest today, Mr. Grady Crosby.
Thanks so much for that. And I want to start off by just thanking your leadership and all those that had a hand in inviting me today. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you for just a little while today, talking about the intersection of ESG and data, if you will. So as was said, my name is Grady Crosby. Definitely have an affinity towards Charlotte, born and raised in Winston-Salem. So just down the road from you, my son is in Charlotte now with my 3 grandkids, and so definitely have a warm spot in my heart for the Carolinas. I serve as the Vice President and Chief Sustainability and Impact Officer for Northwestern Mutual. So I'm based in Milwaukee, coming to you from warm but not so sunny Florida today, though. So happy Friday the 13th for everyone. And again, just thrilled that you have an opportunity to join in with us on this tech and career talk. So what we're going to do today is, there's just so much content to go through and so little time to get through it all. I'm going to try to stay fairly high level. If I get too deep and start geeking out or whatever, somebody raise their hands and tell me, hey, move on, brother, and I'll be sure to do that. But I do want to go through a couple of things. First, I want to just talk about, what ESG data is, since this is a data group, data technology folk. I want to talk about what ESG data is, and then a little bit about the driving forces behind the demand for ESG data. And you can imagine, I told you I'm the Vice President and Chief Sustainability and Impact Officer. We use sustainability and ESG sort of interchangeably, if you will, at Northwestern Mutual, because the concepts of sustainability, thinking about it in its broadest terms, encompasses the framework of ESG, and we'll get into what that means. And then after we talk a little bit about the driving forces behind this demand for ESG data, I want to talk about the challenges of providing robust ESG data, which hopefully you all will take some solace in, because I think that translates into job security and job availability and opportunities for now going well into the future. And then to cap it all off, to put a pin on that point, the demand for ESG data and the impact on ESG related occupations as a result of that. I hope you don't mind me using data and data kind of interchangeably, if you will. I don't know what the right way to say it is. Some people say data, some people say data. I'm going to use it interchangeably, if you will. I'm sure you all know the old joke. Where did the data programmer go? He went data way. You get data that. Some of y'all did that on the way home this evening, but all right, let's get into this. So what is ESG data? So basically, ESG data is just information about the environmental, E, social, S, and governance attributes of a company, or even an investment, if you will. ESG data is used by investors, analysts, companies, of course, policymakers, other stakeholders, really to understand and make informed decisions about a business's effectiveness, its risk, the sustainability attributes of a business, and opportunities. Of course, I look at opportunities as the flip side of risk. So when you think about ESG as a framework for overviewing your business, especially looking at what you'll hear me talk about a little bit later on, sometimes referred to as non-financial risk. That also means that these are non-financial, if you will, opportunities, if you will. But more specifically, the data has been used for the purpose to determine even a company's investments or a company's ESG score or rating, if you will. Yeah, there's a whole industry of companies that are out here rating companies on how well, if you will, they do ESG. So that's why it's important to have information to assess ESG risk and opportunities. Evaluate a company's supply chain to find out whether or not there's resiliency in the supply chain. Is there a risk with regard to your supply chain being disrupted in some form or fashion? And of course, to track internal performance. And then lastly, voluntary, or now you're going to hear me talk about this big wave towards more regulatory mandated disclosures. So voluntary disclosures that company makes in their sustainability reports and things of that nature, but also in mandated regulatory reporting and disclosure requirements, which we'll get into as well. So even more specifically, so that's broad-based what ESG data is, what's included in that ESG data. E, environmental, of course, is all about a company's energy usage, carbon emissions, the GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, water usage, waste management practices, all are included in that environmental data. The social data is all around a company's labor practices, how it interacts not only with its employees, but even more broadly, the community around it, to include all types of internal D&I and culture building work, if you will, as well as external community engagement and investments that go into community building. And then lastly, the G stands for governance, which I geek out about sometimes. My background is that I practiced law for about 30 years before I got into sustainability and sustainability related issues. And the governance data is really about how a company manages itself and holds itself accountable to its own ambitions, from its board composition to executive pay, anti-corruption policies, ethics policies, how well and often does it train its employees on ethical considerations, and a number of other metrics that can come up in how a company governs itself. So you see from this type of data, there are so many benefits that companies can extract. And that's why this data is so important, because it helps companies identify and mitigate potential environmental and social and governance risks or impacts on their operations, on their value chain, and even more specifically, and maybe even more importantly, their reputational value. It can also help investors identify companies that may be exposed to risk such as climate change or labor disputes or human rights violations, if you know that a company is not doing well with regard to its labor practices, that's a risk that comes up in the S category. And that may mean that there could be a strike that could prevent that company from performing the way that it should and therefore delivering the results that it has promised. Or the company may not be well positioned because of its labor practice to have a great reputation for employee attraction and engagement. And therefore, that company may have a challenge with regard to attracting and retaining the type of talent that it needs to really push itself and go forward and continue to perform in a long-term, sustainable, value-creating way. So companies that prioritize and manage these issues are better positioned for long-term sustainable success. And that's one of the reasons I think there's this strong intersection between how we talk about ESG and sustainability. It's all about long-term success and shareholder value creations. And, you know, a number of studies have shown that companies that have strong ESG performance just tend to have better financial results, lower market volatility, and more resilient to market downturns as a result as well. And so the data that goes into this really, in my mind, kind of allows companies to make evidence-based decisions. Evidence-based decisions about how it continues to go forward and operate. And of course, I mentioned reputation and brand. This type of data can also help companies communicate their commitment to community, commitment to sustainability, commitment to social responsibility to all of its stakeholders. And that's what helps to enhance reputation and build trust and attract not only customers, but employees, potential employees who value those types of issues. There's a great deal of increased investor interest in incorporating ESG factors into their investment decisions. As a result, companies that really prioritize and manage these issues may actually have an access to a broader range of investors, institutional investors, and potentially at a better valuation, which means more value for the company as well. So there are real financial implications of having a sound environmental, social, and governance acumen for a company, if you will. As I said, you know, another, you know, reason for, you know, this type of data is to help companies comply with regulations around more disclosures and forced public disclosures that are coming up in this area. And as I mentioned, improve decision-making as well. And that, you know, really goes into the forces behind the demand. The forces behind the demand for ESG data. What's really driving this demand, and why are you now hearing more about ESG data? Because to tell you the truth, this is not necessarily something new. This framework, though, has evolved as a more organized way to think about it. But if you really think about it, companies that, you know, pay attention to the environment that are around them, pay attention to not only their employees, but the community that it's in, and really have a strong governance acumen, if you will, around how it governs itself and holds itself accountable. Those companies have been doing well for some amount of time. They just never necessarily put it all in one framework, if you will. So not something totally new, but the way that we aggregated all these factors together to understand how they create value and how they identify risk is somewhat new. And that's part of the driving force behind this demand for ESG data. There's a growing concern over climate risk and whether or not businesses and financial sectors are prepared to address it. And do they know how to mitigate potential losses? The only way companies can know how and we've seen what's going on with climate lately. We've seen more severe weather events all over the world, from floods and fires and hurricanes and tornadoes and just more erratic weather patterns. And we've seen the smog that comes in from these fires wherever you may live. So all of these are risks to climate and the environment, that if you are a company servicing customers, how does it impact your customer base? How does it impact your employee base? And how does it impact the product or service that you are trying to sell? And unless you know that and have a way to actually see that and data to kind of prove that out, it's really tough for you to come up with a risk strategy or mitigation strategy to mitigate against potential losses. Like I said, climate is a huge thing. Everybody knows how a glacier holds data, right? What do you call data that's in a glacier? Frostbite, of course. Anyway, some of y'all will get that on the way home. But anyway, a report recently by Ceres said that a lack of action with regard to climate issues could really present a really clear systemic risk to our financial markets, and that could be really significant and disruptive. So therefore, there's increasing stakeholder expectations around ESG reporting and ESG data, and so the need for this data is even in more greater demand. Because in contrast to financial reporting, which of course focuses on returns and what I call the financial material topics to shareholders, if you will, ESG reporting involves the concept of inclusive, or what's sometimes referred to as stakeholder capitalism. Now, what is stakeholder capitalism? Stakeholder capitalism is this philosophy based on the belief that companies have an obligation that goes further than simply providing returns for their shareholders. Stakeholder capitalism would suggest that companies have to be mindful and responsive to their impact on society and the environment. You hear a lot of companies talking about, we want to make sure the space and places that we're in, we leave it better than what we found it. That's a stakeholder capitalistic type statement, if you will, because all of that can involve, the stakeholder capitalism can involve creating secure jobs for employees, of course, embracing sustainable practices, serving customers loyally, cultivating long-term supplier relationships, paying your fair share of taxes as a concept, and of course, as we talked about, minimizing your environmental footprint on the operations. And my contention is that companies that realign to this concept of stakeholder capitalism, meaning you owe something across a wide variety of stakeholders as you look at your business, not just to your customers and not just to your owners, but employees, the community, those who align to this stakeholder capitalism concept, I believe have a competitive advantage over those that try to run business as usual, because we're just in a new place, in a new space in the way business is operated right now. So I'm still driving towards why this data is so important to companies and what's the driving force behind it. Another driving force behind it is the increasing investor appetite and pressure for this data, because investors increasingly believe, as I've stated as my postulate and premise as well, that companies that perform well on ESG are less risky. And if they're less risky, then they're better positioned for the long-term growth and better prepared for uncertainty, which makes investment in these companies a better bet, if you will. Investors have been demanding consistent, reliable, and comparable climate risk data for years. The issue is that it's hard to come by. Institutional investors are also aligning their portfolios toward better ESG performance. And why is this significant? because this signals a different approach from just focusing on what in the past we talked about as responsible funds. Companies that would say we want to do the right thing and responsible funds, we want to be committed to our communities, and you make these blanket statements and they sound real good. We do better together than alone, or we're all in it. You make these great flowery statements, if you will, but that may say that you feel a responsibility to the community, but it doesn't really tell me how you are performing against that. Well, ESG data and these ESG issues are becoming fundamental to performance for all investments. So not just, I got this place carved out for responsible funds. No, if I look at it all in the terms of how well companies are doing with regard to ESG issues, I can evaluate all of my investments across a broad band of performance metrics. And of course, clients and external stakeholders are really demanding and have just increased momentum about wanting more ESG data. And I talk about it a lot in terms of the U.S., but recognize this is not a U.S. deal. This is a global issue. Global investors say that their approach to ESG is really driven by by their client expectations and, of course, reputational concerns. So climate demand is a big factor, and clients are increasingly asking for investments in things like renewable energy and investing in targeting sustainable development goals. The SDGs is a set of goals given by the UN, about 17 SDGs to face and address some of the world's most critical and challenging issues, from poverty to hunger to education to healthcare. Again, 17 SDGs. And clients are asking how companies are performing against any one or subsection or subset of these goals. And of course, there's a lot of self-pressure in this area as well, because companies want to hold themselves accountable to their stakeholders by increasing transparency in this area. And the only way they increase that transparency is to make sure that they are tracking and providing the external ESG data that their clients and stakeholders are looking for. So we're moving more towards a purpose-first business model, or purpose come alongside a strategic or business goal. The data is needed to avoid this concept of greenwashing. If you've heard of that concept before, greenwashing is this concept of companies just really talking about how well they're doing in the sustainability space without really providing concrete data to back that up. So the better your ESG data is, there's more or less concern about greenwashing, which gives investors more trust and confidence to invest in these companies. And I mentioned before, the data is vastly needed for employee attraction and retention issues. Employees are fast becoming sensitive to discrepancies between what a company says and the way it acts. And so that's why we need this data, because as I said before, there's one thing to say that I want to act responsibly and I'm committed to my community, but there's another thing to see your environmental and social and governance data to really back this up. The evolving demands from talent pools means that the best candidates are really insisting on more from employees before they make a career move. And money doesn't always motivate employees in this way. When you talk to the millennials and zennials, a lot of people are looking to make more than a paycheck. They really want to make a difference. And this type of data not only adds purpose, but it allows a person to feel that not only I'm doing my job, but I'm actually creating and contributing to a better society by the way I go about my job as well. So attracting and keeping great talent today really means stepping beyond just doing the basic must-haves, must-dos, if you will, and doing more. So that means you have to clearly articulate purpose and provide some inspiration that makes employees want to join, stay, and really give their best effort to your organization. So the fundamental relationship between environmental, social, and governance principles and the employee experience, adding that purpose to the employee, enables companies to really force this essential bond between people and work, because we know that an organization's people are an essential part of that S proposition in ESG. And then let me also say a quick word about these governmental incentives that is also contributing to this increased demand for this type of data. As you may recall, the government's responses to COVID-19 in many countries included large stimulus packages, which were tied to, if you will, green outcomes, with specific focus on accelerating transition to a zero carbon economy, also addressing issues that were going on with the disparities happening in underrepresented communities. And companies were looking to take advantage of these government incentives. But that would require good ESG data to really gain access to such financing and then the ability to report their progress and outcomes. So for instance, in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act by President Biden in 2022, it was, of course, a transformative law helping the U.S. meet climate goals and strengthen energy security. You hear Biden talk all the time about investing in America to create great paying jobs. To get that money in the Inflation Reduction Act, you had to be able to report on your significant drivers of your ESG data. Again, there's also a lot of mandatory reporting coming on board from a regulatory standpoint. There are these emerging standards and frameworks, and it's just really an alphabet soup from TCFD, which stands for Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which is a reporting protocol to make sure that companies are aware of the impact of climate and social issues on their ability to deliver on their business plan. There's an organization called the International Sustainability Standards Board. You hear about it, it's called this ISSB. They recently issued their first reporting guidelines for global public companies and private companies and government organizations. So there's this move to mandatory reporting that has increased in the amount of data that companies and firms must disclose. And in order to do that, you need that data that's robust, that's auditable, that's assured and standardized. And this happens on both the federal and the state level. As a private company, Northwestern Mutual, one of the first things that I was doing when I came into this role was to understand, for instance, what does our carbon footprint look like? What's our greenhouse gas emissions and things of that nature? And GHG comes up in these different scopes. Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 gets really detailed about things that actually happen outside of your walls, if you will, such as supply chains and things of that nature. Well, just so happens that California just enacted, in fact, Governor Newsom just signed the bill this week that will require that by January 1 of 2025, companies are going to have to develop regulations that would allow them to be able to report and publicly disclose their emissions across all of those categories. So that has really now accelerated our need to be able to access this type of data so that we can report in an accurate way. with regard to that. And then, as I said, that's just the US. Europe has what they call the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. That's a framework that's going to have a phased-in approach starting in 2024. That's also going to require companies that, you don't have to be based in Europe, but if you're doing business overseas, you're going to have to report on how sustainability issues such as climate change impact your business and how your operations in turn affect people and planet. And this is also known sometimes as this concept of double materiality, if you will. So suffice it to say, there's just an abundance of pressures coming down the pipeline to have more available ESG data. But as I move towards trying to close out here, what are the challenges of providing this ESG data? And we're going through this right now at Northwestern Mutual. Everybody is kind of, in different places on their sustainability journey, if you will. But, I think the biggest challenge that I see and the biggest challenge that we face at Northwestern Mutual is really all around data availability. So access issues, access to the data, and I would say data quality, the accuracy or the completeness of the data, if you will. While the market continues to demand transparency, most would I think agree with me that data availability and data quality are the greatest challenges with respect to this ESG data for disclosure. So as we've seen, this lack of robust data is really the biggest adoption barrier, if you will, to having robust ESG practices. The other thing that's coming up in this space is that there are really inconsistent ESG ratings that go on. There's a lack of consistency in ESG scores that makes it difficult as well. The data that different ESG raters and companies are looking for, all of these different raters, you hear of companies like MSCI, Sustainalytics, CDP, which stands for the Carbon Disclosure Project. All of these different raters have different frameworks, and none of them are comparable. And so which rater do you manage towards, and what data do you aggregate in order to get there continues to be an issue as well. Data management. Accurate ESG reporting requires effective use of technology. But, a lot of, people in the industry right now, and I have to say that for Northwestern Mutual as well, organizations are going to have to invest more into technology to really address this demand for consistent and reliable measurement, reporting, and disclosures. Because right now, it's more of an ad hoc, decentralized approach. We want to have more consistent ESG data, but it's a huge coordination issue because the data ends up being in all places across the organization. You think of the E, of course, facilities is going to have some of that data, and scope 3, some of your investments are going to have some financed emissions, and so there's data there. You think of your supply chain, there's environmental emissions and waste, water and usage type of data there. So it's all of it. You get to the social part. There's some held in HR. There's some held in marketing. Where do you go to get all this data? It's a multi-departmental, cross-functional type area to get the data. And so it means it has to be highly coordinated, because most firms right now are not, just don't have the capacity or the tools and resources to really take a good holistic firm-wide approach to evaluating and implementing and really rationalizing all of this data. So what does that mean? There's great fragmentation in the data. And so some of the most challenging aspects of ESG data management is really trying to handle these constantly evolving and new ESG data content while you're managing multiple parties where the data is coming from, and you may be managing multiple ESG vendor data feeds, because there's all these companies that are selling products to help you extract your ESG data, and then aligning all of that content to what really is material to you as a company, what makes sense to you. And so this challenge of integration of large volumes of ESG data from these multiple sources and the lack of consistency can lead to quality issues and can then lead to operational disruptions. And the quality issues are huge because, as I talked about, the regulatory landscape is requiring more and more that your ESG data be authenticated, that it be auditable, that just as we give out, this financial information that of course is auditable and therefore reliable, your ESG data should be the same. And so that provides a challenge as well as ESG data. If ESG data is going to become more a part of the mainstream data and research workflows, if you will, this rigor that the ESG data set has to be just as rigorous as a financial data set. We're just not ready right now to fully embrace that, of course, depending on what company and where you are in your sustainability journey. There's a lack of technology in the area that makes that really difficult. I wish we're not there yet. There was some type of ESG sustainability TurboTax, if you will, that we could just plug all the data in one place, and it rationalizes across these different areas, and then allows you to spit out the results that are most valuable and insightful to you. But right now, we don't have the sustainability ESG TurboTax. So if that's part of your idea as a new business plan, I think it would you do well by creating something that can put it all in one place. Because this assurance thing is rough. That's springing up a whole micro ecosystem, if you will. Because if you are planning to obtain assurance or assurance, your ESG data to be auditable, if you will, where do you go to get it? Because there are a few companies that are equipped to provide and meet the assurance requirements, which is an important tool in ESG governance and making sure that you're accurate, if you will. And then the other challenge in this area is just a lack of ESG strategy and governance structure. Companies are looking to meet these increasing stakeholder expectations, but haven't fully ramped up really intentional departmental or institutional work around it. It's still being done in a very ad hoc way. One of the mantras that we have for we call our ESG or sustainability group at Northwestern Mutual, our enterprise sustainability and impact group. One of our mantras has been that we want to be the sole source of truth around this ESG data. We know the work has been going on for 165 years in a company like Northwestern Mutual, but for the first time over the last couple of years, we've really have an intentional focus around trying to really wrap our arms around that and really aggregate all that data so that we can look at it, as I talked about before, in a very holistic way. So companies are actively working towards enhancing their governance over ESG disclosures, but not quite there yet because of insufficient staffing levels, insufficient skills, if you will, education in this area, if you will. Staffing is going to continue to be a demand. And so that's why that really segues nicely into what I want to talk about very briefly lastly here, and that's the impact of ESG data for related occupations now and into the future. I hope if there's anything you've gotten out of this conversation today, is that this demand for robust ESG data is insatiable. And if the demand for the data is insatiable, it likely follows that the demand for ESG talent is going to be insatiable going forward as well. If companies want to rise to really meet this momentum of more robust reporting, they're going to need the right mix, if you will, of skilled professionals, streamlined processes, if you will, in this area. They're going to need technology to address stakeholder expectations for high quality ESG data that's going to instill trust and enhance reputation. So more sectors are trying to integrate ESG into their overall strategy and business goals and really make sustainability and community connections a significant part of their actions going forward. And so the demands for ESG roles, I believe, and I think this is the great news you can take away on Friday the 13th, that the demand for ESG roles is going to continue to rise in the coming years. There's just going to be an increasing demand for ESG professionals as more businesses recognize the value of sustainable business practices. The need for those professionals is going to just continue to rise. I never would have told you back in, I didn't even tell you how long it was I graduated from law school, that I would have known anything about being a chief sustainability officer. Really, to tell you the truth, when I finished law school, that role didn't necessarily exist. And even as we sit here in 2023, some of the ESG roles and demands for different analysts and strategists and other professionals connected to ESG, we don't know what those roles are going to be right now. We just don't have a crystal ball to be able to look at it, other than to say that the job opportunities are going to just continue to expand across industries. And this is what I love about it as well. These job opportunities are not limited at all to a specific industry or sector, because ESG related jobs can be found in various industries, from banking and finance to energy, technology, retail, travel. I'm just looking at a commercial the other day about a cruise liner. MSG was talking about how they, do you think that the cruising industry can go to net zero? We don't know, but we're constantly looking at ways to find out. So travel, healthcare is big as well. Even the entertainment industry faces not only some E issues, but certainly some S issues, as we've seen from the strikes that have gone on with the writers and actors here lately as well. But most ESG experts, I think, in these roles that are going forward are going to be working on tracking and reporting and analyzing ESG data to help companies frame the right policies and the frameworks that they need to further improve their ESG performance. If you were hiring ESG professionals 5 to 10 years ago, the skill sets that you'll be looking for were mostly around data analysis. But now you really want people who also understand how to integrate ESG considerations into the business strategy, that can extract that data and make some judgments about it as well. So what ESG related occupations am I talking about that you can expect to see over the next few years? Some of the roles, I think, will be around social impact analysts, people who are in charge of assessing a company's social impact and recommending ways to improve it. These roles, such as the corporate responsibility officer, these positions ensure that companies comply with laws and regulations pertaining to sustainability and corporate responsibility, that double materiality, if you will, and as well as developing and implementing policies to promote what we call those responsible business practices. ESG analysts and ESG specialists, companies and roles that will analyze a company's portfolio in an industry or a sector and make recommendations to improve it. Sustainability consultants. These are positions that assist organizations in identifying and addressing sustainability issues through that ESG data. Renewable energy project managers and analysts for energy and sustainability that can look at data with regard to consumption and use and identify opportunities to improve energy efficiency and reduce emissions. Supply chain sustainability, carbon and emissions analysts. These are all positions and special expertise positions who can help companies prepare for these mandated disclosures, if you will. And like I said, I think even newer roles in ESG and climate alignment are going to emerge as companies, extend their reach. There are going to be increasing demands to have proper governance frameworks in place and expertise around disclosures. I talked about scope 3. I can see ahead of scope 3 ESG disclosures being a new role within companies. The head of climate alignment, if you will, to lead efforts for future net zero commitments and how companies are talking about how they're going to decarbonize and use less carbon. And let me put a special pin in this real quick, and just to say that I really believe that these roles are going to provide even more opportunities for women because if we look at this new ESG 2.0 economy, if you will, women have been working in these ESG spaces for years, but up until now have been really siloed off, if you will, with limited resources and influence. But now I believe because these environmental and especially the social and governance issues that are coming up to be more prominent, I think this could present prime opportunities for more career advancement for these women who've been working in these roles for some time now. Anyway, they haven't always been at the table making all the decisions. Some of the chief sustainability officers who, again, are mostly women, sitting over these silos. But what's happening now is that there is a focus on climate, there's a focus on human rights, there's a focus on human capital management, diversity, equity, inclusion. All of these things are making, a timer is going off, all these things are making their way up to the boardroom, and they're making their way up to the C-suite, and they're becoming central investor issues. And I believe there's going to be a huge opportunity here because climate and ESG issues are moving in that direction, and the women, and particularly minority women, women of color who might be in these positions, hopefully can ride this wave to the C-suite. So in sum, I just believe there's going to be continued growth for the demand for ESG data because of what we've been talking about here over the last few minutes. ESG roles are going to continue to grow closer to the CFO space, if you will, because there's more intentionality about having ESG disclosures being just as predictive, if you will, as the disclosures that come out of the finance organizations. E-specialists, if you will, we're going to have the steepest growth curves, if you will, because there's an urgency around climate change. And for many companies, you hear them talking about net zero by 2050, or some even talking about 2030. There's going to have to be a way to do that. And I believe, lastly, younger generations who are especially attuned to global warming are going to look to work with companies that take this subject seriously, and it's going to increase a demand for these jobs. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Happy to take any questions if that is appropriate, but I do appreciate the time that you've allowed me to spend with you today. What did the drowning data say when someone saw it bobbing in and out of the water? The drowning data said, "I'm sinking." So hopefully this message syncs up with what this group needed and wanted today. from the perspective of looking at how ESG and data intersect going forward.
Thank you, Grady. Thank you for the humor throughout. I do see we have a hand raised by Pat, and then there was a question in the chat as well. So Pat, I'll let you go first, and I'll address the question in the chat, and then we'll see if there are any other questions.
Awesome, awesome. So thanks so much. Appreciate your talk, Grady. Definitely, when I saw it come up, I shared it with some friends of mine just to make sure they were in the conversation, because this is one that is very, very critical. I am the founder of the Career Advancement System. I work with technologists to help them advance in their career and get their first or next promotion by elevating their influence and their impact. So I have a question. I have a couple of questions, but one in particular is you shared, this was so informative. So you shared a lot of opportunities specifically for women of color and, Black leaders, diverse leaders, and the like. My question is, how do technologists best position themselves for these opportunities coming up? And I see my friend here, Timothy Butts, he said, is there a certification? So really want to get a deeper understanding of how to position technologists and those who would be gravitating to these fields for the future.
Yeah, great question. So the need for more specialized education is also out there, but you can see across the landscape, there are a number of different institutions offering opportunities for some type of certification in sustainability or sustainability analytics. Even those certifications I've seen offerings for being certified as a chief sustainability officer. And what do those types of offerings entail? They entail first understanding those different frameworks that I talked about, from GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, to TCFD, to the SASB and MSCI. All of those types of reporting frameworks is what's covered there. And in covering those, you understand the type of data that's required to report to those frameworks, and the connectivity between the data and the predictiveness of performance going forward, which, again, allows, and that's the main thing, to allow for people to predict what the long-term success is going to be or likely to look at. And so those types of certifications are out there. There's just nothing better, though, than having experiential knowledge, getting a chance to really experience it. So I would say that even if you're in an organization right now, if you have a passion towards climate or environmental type issues, a passion towards social issues with regard to the data that it reveals and how to track the data and the impact, just, kind of maybe just raise your hand and see if there's an opportunity in one of those groups to really get involved in the data and analytics that goes into really directing the strategy around, what's going to come next. As I said before, when I was coming into law school, or even college, of course, there was no course in being a chief sustainability officer or what sustainable analytics are, but now they're popping up everywhere, not only from community colleges but to the major four-year universities as well. It just takes a look to see what's out there and what best aligns with what your interests are going forward.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
I see a hand also from Quincy.
Yeah, Lawanza Quince. How are you doing?
Yeah,
I'm pretty good. Yeah, Lawanza Quince. Yeah, I'm a software engineer and used to be a chemist. So when you talk about sustainability and environmental waste manifest, that has a lot of meaning to me. But the question I wanted to ask you was, what internally at Northwestern Mutual do you internally or use a vendor to work with technologies like artificial intelligence, data analytics, where they're using tools like Python and that sort of thing to do your evaluation and your data matrix, number crunching? Are you using those type of technologies also? The role of government in terms of governance and legislating and mandating some level of standardization requirement by those companies that are responsible for performing these data analytic services. Could you speak more on that, Mr. Crosby?
Yeah, real briefly, because I know we're getting out of time here, but there's, and I didn't cover this in my speech, but there are two kind of concepts around ESG. One, ESG as a business or corporate strategy. Two, ESG as an investment strategy. On the ESG investment side, in order to understand if the risk is a good investment risk, if you want to incorporate ESG data, there are actually a number of outside vendors like MSCI that will that already kind of has all that information kind of quantified and sectored off so that companies can really make good evaluative decisions as to whether or not this data presents a good ESG risk. So that's kind of in a package, if you will, available as a pay-for service. And that's what our investors on the investment side of the business use. Our group, our sustainability group, is trying to implement ESG as a corporate strategy for better decision making. And as I said before, we're really early stage in our journey. So we don't have a very robust external technology kind of tool that we're leaning on. That's why I said I would really love to have that TurboTax of sustainability, if you will, somewhere. So we're relying right now on a bunch of in-house made ad hoc systems. And we're just trying to really get people to cobble all that stuff together to be able to see the broader picture. And so even your comment about, the use of generative AI, I just saw an article last week where I think Schneider Electric was talking about how it's incorporating generative AI in its sustainability practices. At Northwestern Mutual, this financial services company that is a fairly low emitter anyway, we're just not there yet. But to your point, that's where the technology and the skill sets and the needs are going to figure out how it's incorporated. So we're early stage. I get notes from vendors every day about here's a data system that you can plug all of your ESG data in and spit out certain results and really help you manage your sustainability outcomes better. But we have a resource limitation that prevents me from going down all those paths. So right now we're trying to emphasize the criticality and doing some internal, if you will, readiness building with our leadership team about why we need to get more intentional and more robust with regard to our tools.
Well, thank you so much for fielding my question. I appreciate it. Have a pleasant and nice day.
Likewise.
Hi, Grady. This is Lynette. I just wanted to say thank you. I know we're at time, but you helped us as data people understand what we're doing and the impact that we can have in these environments. I think you created a great infrastructure around why this information is useful. And we as data professionals are constantly collecting these swaths of information, and to know that it's going to be used for some good to make better decisions at work, I think was the key. Is there a website or something that you can refer the group to so that we can find out additional information that will connect us back to your talk? That was my last request, and David, I'll let you close out after he answers that.
I don't have anything that pops up to my mind right now, Lynette, but I will look for that and share that with you. Maybe something you can share more broadly with the group at a later time.
Sorry, this is Timothy. So as Vice President of BDPA, I was really pleased that Devin already included the link back to this session and also per our mission of the organization. It really echoes out. So I'm pleased that we are able to have, I'm not just pleased, I'm ecstatic that we're able to have this conversation. And in the whole realm of things, look at this audience that we've had today, the great questions, the great sharing. And Grady, thank you so much. You've really been a great intersection of knowledge with us and for us today, and we truly appreciate this opportunity. I personally, in the field of population analytics, am very pleased. Now I'm going to add another feather in my cap because I'm going to sharpen my sword and do a little bit more of the ESG focus. But unbeknownst to me, I was already doing some of this. So thank you for making me more aware. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate the opportunity today.
Thank you, Grady, for sharing with us, and thank you everyone for joining. As Timothy shared, I did drop the link in the chat to our website, bdpa.org/tech in career talks. Now you can find the recording for this session as well as our previous talks, or you can just go to YouTube, look up National BDPA, and it's all there. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that influencer things you're supposed to do. Thank you for joining. Thank you again, Grady, for sharing with us, and we'll see you in our next one. You all stay safe and stay blessed until next time.